Welcome to Friday Starters, Episode 1. The last two national champions were first-time winners, Mississippi State in 2021 and Ole Miss in 2022. Both programs had storied pasts but hadn't managed to get over the final hurdle. Both teams' coaches, Mike Bianco and Chris Lemonis, managed to lead their respective programs to something that hadn't been done before. With Bianco, athletic director Keith Carter said, "Nobody at Ole Miss really talked about Omaha a lot until he got here. He's the one who talked about coming here and winning national championships." And Lemonis inherited a program ripe with history. As Baseball America puts it, longtime Mississippi State coach Ron Polk is known as the godfather of the SEC. Dudy Noble Field is an iconic venue. But the one thing Mississippi State was always missing, however, was a national championship. Both of these coaches have something in common. They took over programs and were able to build strong coaching staffs, recruit well, make the most of their resources, and build a national championship winning team. While the resources at an SEC school don't compare to the majority of the country, a simple fact does remain true. A head coach can make all the difference. Whether it's punching above a program's weight, developing a machine that contends year in and year out, or getting the little things right, head coaches matter an awful lot. So, as you might expect, programs throughout the country are often looking for a new face or someone that can take their program to the next level. Every year, as soon as the regular season wraps up, coaches are fired, resign, retire, and then are hired rapidly throughout the country. After an understandably quiet offseason following the COVID-shortened 2020 year, how does one evaluate a coach after a 15 to 20 game sample, 2021 returned to its usual craziness with 41 changes. High-profile programs like LSU, Arizona State, Arizona, and TCU all entered 2022 with new coaches. First, it was Jim Schlossnagle moving to College Station to take over Texas A&M. Kirk Saarloos, his longtime assistant, assumed the head job, while Arizona's Jay Johnson crossed the country to replace the retired Paul Mainieri at LSU. The Wildcats, meanwhile, turned to Detroit Tigers third base coach Chip Hale. However, the 2022 offseason, it's been even more chaotic. It's ultimately featured just 6 more hires, but the list of Power 5 schools grew to double digits, along with high-profile jobs throughout the other conferences, and it was full of its usual twists and turns. Today, I'll be breaking down some of the biggest departures and hires and attempt to paint a picture of the ever-changing coaching landscape ahead of the 2023 college baseball season. The first Power 5 job opened up on May 22nd, with Kansas's Rich Price retiring following a difficult final season with the Jayhawks. Kansas went just 4-20 in Big 12 play, but Price's legacy remained strong. He took the Jayhawks to 3 NCAA tournaments after the program had been to just 2 before he was hired. Ohio State axed Greg Beals the next day. Beals went 21-30 in his last year with the Buckeyes, finishing 11th in the Big Ten, a far cry from the finishes earlier in the year when he took the Buckeyes to 3 NCAA tournaments and won a pair of Big Ten championships. The departures just kept coming. Baylor's Steve Rodriguez, the 2017 Big 12 Coach of the Year, resigned on the 30th, noting in a statement that 7 years is a long time at one place, and now it is time for a new voice to lead the Baylor baseball program. Northwestern, instead of returning interim head coach Josh Reynolds, elected to embark on a national search. Reynolds, who assumed the role after Spencer Allen retired in 2021, guided the Wildcats to a 24-27 record. Clemson's Monty Lee got the boot on the 31st. Lee got off to a great start with the Tigers, going to 4 straight regionals in his first 4 years, and hosting 3 of them while winning both the ACC regular season and postseason crown. But the Tigers couldn't get past the first round. The last 2 years saw the Tigers miss the tournament twice. A pair of Pac-12 departures followed on the 6th of June. First, Washington's Lindsey Meggs retired after 13 years with the Huskies and a 35-year coaching career. Meggs' impact can't be understated, seeing as he took Washington to Omaha for the first time in 2018 and to 3 national tournaments. Then, USC's Jason Gill was fired. Gill's departure, one marked by a turbulent tenure in Pasadena, came after 3 seasons of just above 500 ball. It was a quick firing. He took over in the COVID-shortened season, but for a program of USC stature, it was unsurprising that he had a quick hook. The Trojans have been to the postseason just once in the last 17 years and have gone through 4 coaches in that time. For those counting at home, 7 Power 5 jobs opened up, along with 20 other roles, before we'd even gotten past the regional round of the NCAA tournament. The carousel spun faster on June 10th when Florida State unceremoniously departed the NCAA tournament. The Seminoles won their first game only to be blown out by Auburn 21-7 before exiting on the heels of a 2-1 loss to UCLA. Mike Martin Jr., who took over 2 years ago for the winningest coach in NCAA history, his father, was fired. Florida State Vice President and Director of Athletics Michael Alford laid it out as such, saying, "Ultimately, the decision came down to whether our baseball program was performing up to the admittedly high standards that we have established through our historic success, and I do not believe we were." Naturally, the first coach that people looked to was Notre Dame's Link Jarrett, a former Seminole and shoo-in for National Coach of the Year. At the time of Martin's firing, Jarrett's Irish were entering the Super Regionals against national title favorite Tennessee. Notre Dame came away with a dramatic 8-6 win in Game 1, and Jarrett was asked about the FSU job after the game. He was quoted as saying, "I mentioned it today. I said, I love you guys. We're here to win this. I'm not talking about this coaching stuff." 2 games later, Notre Dame had pulled off the upset of the tournament and perhaps the year, punching their ticket to Omaha by beating the top-ranked Volunteers. The Irish beat Texas to start the College World Series, but losses to Oklahoma and Texas A&M followed, ending what was an impressive run for a program that had gone 20 years without a College World Series appearance and made just 3 all-time. Jarrett was asked again about Florida State in the post-game press conference and provided the following quote that illuminated plenty of context about the difficulties he'd faced over the last few weeks.
My focus was on them and not the other stuff. And you know what? I had to deal with it last year. And when your program's doing the right thing, you're going to have those distractions, whether it's baseball, basketball, football. And I tried with all I had not to go there in my mind. And it was difficult. But I wanted to know when this thing either ended with a trophy or not, that they were the focus of what I was doing.
3 days later, as many expected, Jarrett took the Florida State job. He was formally announced on June 24th, just under 3 years after taking over in South Bend and taking the Irish to the next step. That set the coaching carousel spinning faster and faster, but first, we've got to go back to the hires that proliferated during the run-up to the College World Series. The Big 12 got 2 new coaches on June 15th. First, Baylor reunited with McLennan Community College head coach Mitch Thompson. Thompson won the 2021 JUCO National Championship with McLennan and is no stranger to Waco, having spent plenty of years there under Steve Smith as an assistant. Kansas, meanwhile, surprised by hiring LSU assistant coach Dan Fitzgerald instead of a current sitting head coach. Fitzgerald was quite the promising choice for the Jayhawks, though, as he aided in building up Dallas Baptist over 9 years and spent a season with the Tigers in the SEC. The Clemson job was filled with Michigan's Eric Bakich, fresh off a Big Ten tournament title and just 3 years removed from a College World Series Finals appearance. Bakich is no stranger to South Carolina either, having spent the 2002 season as a volunteer assistant for the Tigers. Meanwhile, in the Big Ten, Ohio State tabbed TCU associate head coach Bill Mazzelio for the job. Mazzelio, a former minor league baseball manager that bounced between the pros and college ranks before spending nearly a decade with the Horned Frogs, was the second high-profile departure from TCU in the last 2 years. Of course, the year prior was Jim Schlossnagle leaving to Texas A&M, but the hold was short-lived. TCU headman Kirk Saarloos effortlessly plucked Nevada head coach TJ Bruce for the associate head coach role that Mazzelio vacated. A day later, the LSU assistant ranks were hit again, with pitching coach Jason Kelly returning to the Great Northwest to take the helm of Washington. Kelly was the Huskies pitching coach from 2013 to 2019, before stints with Arizona State and LSU. He earned an Assistant Coach of the Year honor while with Washington. And more on the Tigers in a bit, seeing as head coach Jay Johnson wasted little time restocking his staff. Northwestern closed out June with a bang, snatching Army head coach Jim Foster to man their program. Foster, who took the Black Knights to 4 straight regionals, COVID excluded, was the 2022 Patriot League Coach of the Year. Foster was previously the Rhode Island head coach from 2006 to 2014. All in all, 21 coaches were hired in June, a group that includes some interesting names that I'd be remiss to not mention. Mark Rardin made the jump from the JUCO ranks to take over at Western Kentucky after a 20-year tenure at Iowa Western Community College. He won 3 national titles there and made 12 JUCO World Series appearances. Fairleigh Dickinson's Rob DeToma across the country to take over at San Francisco. BYU's Trent Pratt and Tulane's Jay Ullman got the interim name removed from their titles. Reigning D3 national champion Brian Ham of Eastern Connecticut State took over for the departing Yale's John Stuper, and up-and-coming Ball State assistant Blake Beamer, just 31 years old, took over at Butler. With the calendar flipping to July, jobs remained open at the likes of Michigan, USC, and Notre Dame. The dominoes quickly started to fall regarding the final big spots. On July 3rd, Michigan opted to bring in Tracy Smith, the former Indiana and Arizona State coach that wasn't in the D1 ranks the year before. Smith, who brought longtime assistant Ben Greenspan with him, has earned NCAA tournament appearances under 3 teams, the Hoosiers, Sun Devils, and Miami of Ohio, making him one of 8 coaches to accomplish that feat. USC, meanwhile, also looked to the state of Arizona and scooped up Grand Canyon's Andy Stankiewicz to lead its program. Stankiewicz is an exciting hire for the Trojans. The former major leaguer is familiar with the Pac-12, having spent 4 years with Arizona State, where his son Drew starred, and is no stranger to turning a program's fortunes around. He took over Grand Canyon in 2012, transitioned them from D2 to D1, and led them to their first ever NCAA regional in 2021 before taking them back the next year. He left the program in good hands too, tapping Greg Wallace, his associate head coach, to fill his shoes for the Antelopes. On July 12th, Notre Dame found their man, snagging VCU Sean Stifler. Like Stankiewicz, Stifler elevated the VCU program, including taking the Rams to their first ever Super Regional in 2015. He'd been with the Rams for 15 years, 5 as an assistant, 10 as a head coach, and will look to continue the Irish's recent rise. VCU, fittingly, opened up August by filling their vacancy with Clemson's Bradley LaCroix. It's his first chance to run a program after leading Clemson's recruiting for quite a few years, while also having previous stints at Tennessee and Western Carolina. LaCroix marked one of many assistant coaches that made the leap to a head coaching job. Others included Oklahoma's Clay Van Hook, hired at UT Arlington, FAU's Greg Mamula, hired at Delaware, VCU's Rich Witten, hired at Florida International, and Lehigh's AJ Miller, hired at rival Lafayette. Perhaps none were more notable than at LSU, where head coach Jay Johnson had to replace both of his assistant coaches as they moved on to Washington and Kansas, respectively. They were short-lived holes in the staff, though, as Johnson pulled off a prolific hire in snagging Minnesota Twins pitching coach Wes Johnson, yes, in the middle of the MLB season, to replace Kelly. Johnson is no stranger to the SEC, having worked as a pitching coach at Mississippi State and at Arkansas before joining Minnesota in November 2018. Then, to fill the other role, Johnson turned to Duke's Josh Jordan, the Blue Devils' associate head coach. Jordan's a well-established assistant coach, having earned 2018 Baseball America Assistant Coach of the Year honors. Ultimately, Johnson had 2 departures, quickly replaced with talented assistants. Meanwhile, Texas head coach David Pierce made the surprising move of firing Sean Allen, reassigning longtime assistant Philip Miller to a new role, then saw volunteer Troy Tulowitzki step down as well. Allen, the 2021 D1 Baseball Assistant of the Year, had been with Pierce every step of his collegiate career. Pierce said in an interview with 104.1 that, "In my role you have to make tough decisions, and I just felt like I have to make the best decisions for the University of Texas baseball, no matter what, and that's what we did." With 2 new assistant spots, Pierce turned to Woody Williams, a former major leaguer who spent the last 6 seasons as the pitching coach at junior college power San Jacinto, and Steve Rodriguez, the recent Baylor departure. Those 2 programs and coaches aside, plenty of other assistants moved around. Let's start with 2 standalone names. Monty Lee landed on his feet, returning to South Carolina as an associate head coach under Mark Kingston. Lee was a Gamecock from 2003 to 2008, so the familiarity and success he had there should serve South Carolina well. Another former head coach is Travis Jewett. After manning Tulane from 2017 through May of 2022, Jewett joined Andy Stankiewicz's staff at USC. He's no stranger to the Pac-12, having made previous stops at Washington, Washington State, and Arizona State. In terms of new staffs, Eric Bakich built a well-regarded staff in Clemson. He brought recruiting coordinator Nick Schnabel from Michigan and snagged former Florida State assistant Jimmy Bellinger to coach the pitching. The same goes for Sean Stifler in Notre Dame. The head coach brought Seth Cutler-Volz with him to coach the pitching staff, then added Old Dominion's Logan Robbins, a key piece who developed the Monarchs' prolific offense. Link Jarrett kept it simple. He brought both his assistants from Notre Dame in Chuck Ristano and Rich Wallace. Mosiello at Ohio State profited off of other teams' departures. He grabbed the fired Sean Allen from Texas, a highly regarded assistant, then brought in Andrew C. from Clemson after Lee's departure. Much of the attention is often on the transfer portal. Which high-profile graduate student is going where, or which potential major league draft prospect is switching schools. While that is undoubtedly a topic of a future video, it felt important to highlight the movement of head coaches and their assistants. Almost 16% of D1 head coaching jobs changed this offseason, with a plethora of assistants following suit. How will these changes play out? We'll get the first look at these new look programs in just a few weeks. Thanks for watching. Don't hesitate to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and follow us on Twitter at Friday Starters for more college baseball analysis. Until next time.